أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواحنا له الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وقرآن الحكيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم هو أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها فاستغفروا ثم توبوا إليه إن ربي قريب مجيب صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Tonight, inshallah, as we close out the nights of Aza and these series of lectures, I wanted to speak about something that is sort of related to different points I've mentioned throughout the nights in the Salat al-Jum'ah, and that is on the idea of technology and what our relationship is with this phenomena that we call technology. Before doing so, there's a book called The Anxious Generation. It's written by a psychologist in New York University. I've mentioned a few of his works before. It's worth reading. In that book, he talks about a metaphor. He says, imagine in the future, it is possible to send your children to Mars, and they advertise a new world for your children, one which is filled with all kinds of advanced technology, medicine, a different environment. But because it's Mars, it's a different level of solar radiation, there's a different pull of gravity, there are unknown diseases because this is the first batch of people that are going. But Mars has sort of been settled and we have the ability to live there, so there's a lottery, and by virtue of lottery you can send your children to Mars. And he says, despite the fact that the promises are one of medicine and technology and maybe even higher levels of education and experience, no rational parent would send their children off to another world like that because of the number of unknowns. You might sit and think and maybe wait a few generations before you see what kind of world is Mars. How does it affect lifespan? How does it affect sickness and health? How does it affect sanity? He says, what is interesting, and the point that he's trying to make, is that in the modern world, we've created a world which is largely governed by technology, the tools of technology. And we have basically put them on a generation without really understanding the actual ramifications. Children, especially if you're of a particular age, you would have been born into a world of, let's say, smartphones and the internet and social media that was not really sort of analyzed in terms of its cost benefit before you were subjected to it. It's just the world you live in. And so he says it's kind of strange that a rational person is never going to send their children off to a different world without understanding the actual consequences. But we live now on planet Earth in a society which we've created a world without really understanding what are the effects. And we don't have time to get into it. It's a short speech tonight, inshallah, as we always say. But we created a world in which now they're talking about effects all the way from psychological and social distresses all the way to like radioactive, the effect of radiation in our devices. We have, diseases or a rise of, you could say, psychological and psychiatric diseases on a scale that humans have never seen before. It's all mapped out. Whether it's loneliness, there's studies that talk about the increase of vanity. I'm not really sure how they're measuring or who's volunteering for that study, but there actually are measurements of vanity. So we have created a world that you and I occupy in, and we don't really have a say in it. I'm just born in it, and my children are born in it, and so on and so forth. And the effects of that particular world are usually found out after the fact. It's not studied in a lab. In the same way, if I was to be deciding between Mars or Earth, I'm going to wait a few generations. I'm going to send, some test subjects. I'm going to send a group of people who I might not like that much and see how it turns out for them. But here we live in a world where you and I are the guinea pigs. Quite literally, we are the guinea pigs of an experiment in the hands of a very small number of people in Silicon Valley. And they have accumulated a type of power that has never been seen before in human history. It has never been the case that such a small group of people in such a concentrated area have had this level of impact on culture, on language, on religion, on values, and now on politics. It's never been seen in human history. And so we're living in a time where you and I are the subjects of experiments. Now this world that Jonathan Haidt is talking about, the world that is created outside of a conversation that includes you and I, he says it doesn't happen out of nowhere. And I mentioned this in Salat al-Jumu'ah, but because it's a different crowd, it's worth repeating. There's another book which the brothers have mentioned that I didn't mention a lot of books this year, so I'm going to give you, a list here. There's another book called Technopoly by Neil Postman. He's a cultural critic. I mentioned him in the workshop that was here a few weeks ago about the purpose of education. In this book, he talks about what does it mean to live in a society that is run by technology. And one thing that he observes is that a technological society is not the society plus technology. He gives a metaphor, an analogy. He says, imagine you have an ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, you have all kinds of animals. You have owls, you have birds, you have snakes, you have gerbils, you have, insects, frogs, whatever. And you have caterpillars. Now you have all of these animals in this ecosystem, and you take out caterpillars. The ecosystem is not just the ecosystem minus caterpillars. The removal of the caterpillars changes the entire ecosystem. It changes the food supply chain. It changes who's predatory. It changes the diet of particular animals within that. It could be the case that some animals or insects that feed on caterpillars go extinct because they don't have a food source. So the ecosystem is not just X plus Y, but the entire thing, the entire substrate of that ecosystem is completely altered. It's not the same as before. Now he uses this to show that society plus technology, or a form of technology, is not that society plus technology. We're not, 1980s America plus the internet. It's a new America. We're not the world plus social media. It's a new world. And in the same way that people go extinct, or animals would go extinct without caterpillars, you have people who lose sanity with the addition of social media. It changes the very fabric of their understanding of reality. So technological change is not just me plus my phone. It changes how I view myself. It changes how I view my parents. It changes and it alters my relationships with ulama, with knowledge. It changes my relationship with my leisure time. It changes my relationship with my own mind. There was a time, not too long ago, where you could be bored and you talk to somebody pre-phone, and you're sitting in silence with somebody, and you say, you're sitting in silence, you get to that point where it's a little bit awkward. Now it's like really awkward, really fast. Before, you could sit in silence for a little bit. And you look at the person next to you and you say, it's been a little bit quiet. What are you thinking about? They'll say, I'm just thinking about life. I'm thinking about cartoons, whatever. Now, you look at people, you say, it's been a little bit quiet, you're a little quiet. What are you thinking about? Huh? What? No, nothing. You say, no, there must be no, there's nothing. There's nothing going on. We don't even know how to relate to our own minds. We cannot sit in boredom. Right? I think it was Kierkegaard who said that the bane of all of man's existence is his inability to sit alone in silence, to be alone with himself. We live in a world now where this is the reality, is people cannot just be alone. You sit in a room with other people and you can quite literally go on Instagram and be in a totally different universe. You can get a pair of glasses now and be in a multiverse. You can be in a whole different constructed reality. Two people sitting right next to each other in IABA. But both of them on their phone, one is in Fiji, the other's in Bahamas. Because we're not present. And we all feel it. We know the world is not the same. It's different. And so this is what these two people are talking about, Jonathan Haidt and Neil Postman, that technological change is real ecological change. It changes the ecosystem and all of the individual people or individuals within that ecosystem. Now this is something that, as I've been saying in previous nights, whether it was with democracy or whatever the other issues that we've been talking about, these are issues that have always been understood by people who had a sense of reality, Muslim or otherwise. And I'm bringing these individuals to show that a lot of these, as I said last year, plenty of times, a lot of these are not just Muslim issues. Trust me, it's not Islam versus the world. In a very real way, it's sanity versus insanity. And we need partners. We need people who realize that the world is not tenable. And in that fight, one of the earliest people who understood some of these wisdoms was Plato. In Farsi we say Aflatun. In Urdu we say Plato. Now Plato wrote a few books. He wrote The Republic, we talked about that. He has a series of writings called the Dialogues of Plato. And these are basically his recordings of conversations with Socrates. In one of these dialogues called Phaedrus, Plato introduces a conversation between two individuals, Thuth and Thamos. If you have a lisp, it's very difficult to say, so you bear with me. Thuth and Thamos. Now Thuth is an inventor. He has spent his whole life creating inventions and all different kinds of magical inventions that he's come up with. And he brings a set of these inventions to a king by the name of Thamos. Now he presents all of them one by one in front of Thamos. And in the recording of this conversation between these two individuals, the only artifact or the only tool which is talked about is the tool of writing. Now, Thuth presents writing and he says, I've invented a tool that is going to change the world, called writing. And he says that it's going to increase wisdom. It's going to increase the spread of knowledge. It's going to bring all of this benefit to the world. I just want to pull back a little bit. Think about writing. None of us consider writing a technology. Why? Because it's so ubiquitous. We all write, whether it's on your iPad or your pen. It's become so normal that we don't really think of it as a tool or technology. But that's because it's just a part of our life. But at a point, technology, whether through the printing press or through the pencil or through the stencil or through nail and hammer, was a type of tool, technology. So he presents writing. And he has all of these good things to say about it. Now Thamos is listening to all the other inventions and doesn't say anything. In fact, we don't actually know what they are. It's not recorded in the conversation. But Thamos calls out this one tool. And what he says is that what you think about writing as a tool that will bring about all of these benefits, you're only looking at the benefits because you're the creator. And the creator of a thing always imagines the good that it is going to produce. You need a wise person to understand what will be the negative effects of the tool. And so Thamos says, while you think this will increase wisdom, it's going to do the opposite. What it will do is it will reduce the faculty of memory, because people will be relying on their written works. It will allow for, as previously, if you were a knowledgeable person, you had to articulate it in your language, in your lisan, your zaban. But now, through the power of writing, you can copy the works of other people and pass it off as your own and feign a type of wisdom. Now, the point is not that writing is good or bad, but what this conversation is trying to teach us is that there are creators of tools who will always sell you on their perceived benefits. But don't fall for it, because every piece of technology has something positive to offer, but also has unintended consequences, sometimes intended consequences. But each and every one of us has blind spots. And the creators of technology are no different. Just because the guy is valued at $300 billion does not make him intelligent. It certainly does not make him wise. And there's a lot of capital interest for him to sell you on his product. And so for us to imagine that just because the guy is presenting a certain piece of technology, that this is going to change the world, revolutionize how we interact with one another, introduce universal wealth, education, solve all kinds of diseases, and all of these kinds of promises, we shouldn't buy it. It requires wisdom to step back. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the question that all of these three writers are trying to introduce is, what is the world that is created by technology? And I want to frame the discussion in this way, because unfortunately, we get bogged down into, is it halal or haram? We get so hyper-focused on just this one particular thing. And we don't stop to ask, how is this affecting the world? It might be the case that something is halal for me as an individual to use, and that's okay. That's between you and your marja. But it also might be the case that something which is halal for me will create a world that I don't want to live in. It will create a world that will normalize certain behaviors that are not actually healthy, even if they might be halal in some technical sense. It might create a world where for me individually, I can run my business on social media, but the larger world is increasingly isolated, increasingly lonely, increasingly depressed, and increasingly vain. Is the trade-off, just because it's halal for me, worth it? Worth my participation in the ecological change of a particular technological phenomena? This is a question that each of these three writers are asking. And I want to frame how we think about technology in this way, because oftentimes, unfortunately, the conversation gets short-circuited. Is it halal or haram? It's like, okay, at the end of the day, is that literally how you live your life? If I tell you, for example, it's haram to kill somebody, you say, oh yeah, I didn't know that, I guess I should stop. No, you don't live your life based on the extreme red lines. You live your life based on a particular moral parameter that you've understood above the letter of the law. All of us live life in that way. But for some reason, when it comes to things that we want to do and that we have a personal vested interest in, we look for the letter of the law. And so for us, whether it's politics or democracy or whatever, voting, technology, the question, yes, the baseline is it halal or haram. But above that, there are other consequences to doing something beyond just the personal individual sin or the permissibility. Now, in that question of the world, it's not enough to talk about it as if it's just the world outside. Because each and every one of us is a world as well. When Neil Postman or Jonathan Haidt are talking about this technology or the introduction of a technology affects the world and ecosystem, well, you and I are also individual worlds. We have it in the Diwan of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, you think of yourself as some insignificant thing, but inside of you is Alim al-Akbar. Inside of each and every one of us is a world. So I should be protective of that world as well. It affects the world outside of me as well as the world inside of me. And that's what we've been talking about. The symbiotic relationship between the external world and the internal world, between the social reality and the world of the spirit. Technology, if we're considering it as a phenomena, has these external effects, but it also has internal effects as well. So now what we want to look at is how can we step away from basic terms like tools and technology? Because those terms, I think, are not really helpful. They don't really help us understand how can we have an actual Muslim response to these issues. When we think about it just as a tool or technology, we don't have within our own Islamic tradition an analog. When I say the word technology, what does that mean in the Islamic tradition? For example, if I say piety, you say taqwa. If I say faith, you say iman. If I say technology, what do you say? Right? We don't have. We have no concept of it. What is the meme? Technology? Technologia. You said this. We don't have a counterpart. We don't have an analog. And it's not that we don't have one. It's that we've removed ourselves from the teachings of Islam. And so we imagine that it's not there, but it is there. And so that's what we want to talk about today. In the Holy Quran, before getting to that, one, I've been sort of avoiding this because some people are really not worth mentioning from the minbar. We're going to do it anyway. One of those individuals is a man by the name of Machiavelli. The Machiavelli, if you just Google the most important or influential works or individuals on political science or political theory, he's one of the first individuals that comes up. And his most important book, The Prince, he talks about a couple of concepts. Two of the main concepts that he talks about, and it's very interesting because you can see it played out in the world. He talks about two related concepts. The first is fortuna, and the second is virtue. Fortuna, for Machiavelli, and when we say it's a very Machiavellian approach, what we mean is something that is like built on brute force, that is utilitarian. These two concepts, he defines fortuna as like nature, the forces of nature that are outside of man's control. They're the natural disasters, they're the flow of rivers, they're the seasons. And how he describes fortuna as like a woman. And you'll excuse me for saying this, but he says, in order to control fortuna, you have to basically manhandle her, strangle her, and beat her into compliance. This is, when we say Machiavellian, this is the most foundational political, philosophical ideology of the Western world. This is the view. And virtue, unlike how we have it in Islam or Aristotelian virtue, for him is the ability to do that. The ability to be, controlling and manhandling of nature. That you just plow your way forward. You just make it happen. And this is the world that we live in. I mentioned this in the workshop, but we have, this guy, Eric Andreessen, I think, the old Microsoft guy, one of the most wealthy venture capitalists in the world. He says, I don't believe in introspection. I don't believe in introspection. Why? Because it slows me down. I don't believe in muhasabah. I don't believe in muraqabah. I don't believe in accountability. I just do it. Just go forward. This idea of Machiavelli is not just philosophical. People live their life based on these philosophies and they run the world. So now for you and I, how do we think about the world? How do we think about nature? Because if the question is, what is the world in reality? Now we can think about what is the world that they are attempting to create. I have to have an understanding of the actual world so that I can measure between the world that is being forcibly, introduced to us by some Machiavellian measures. In the Holy Quran, Allah talks about this. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says, and we're going to go through these pretty quickly, so inshallah you follow along. The first thing that Allah talks about in terms of the world, in terms of creation, is that it is not in vain. It is not something that is accidental. It's not something that has no meaning. He says, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. We didn't create all of this in vain, without meaning, without purpose. All of this creation has meaning infused in it. When we say ayat, when we talk about ayat ilahi, ayat of the Quran, ayat of nature, we're talking about things that have reality. Beings and creations and mountains and rocks and birds that have reality. When we say in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything in the heavens and the earth does the tasbih of Allah. That literal statement is everything in the heavens and the earth, in the skies and on the ground. The rock to the bird to the human is doing tasbih. Whether you and I perceive it, coming back to perception, is irrelevant. Allah is speaking truth, al-haq, with a capital Ha. It is absolutely true. So the world for us, first of all, is a world infused with meaning. He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألم تر أن الله يسبح له من في السماوات ومن والأرض والطير صفات. That don't you see that everything in the heavens and the earth is doing the tasbih of Allah, including the birds in flight. The birds in flight. كل قد علم صلاته. They're in flight and they know their salah. You and I who just prayed, we prayed the prayer that we know. But the birds in flight are praying the prayer that they know. They're doing the salah that they know. وَتَسْبِيحَهُ. And they're doing their tasbih. When you hear that bird singing, subhanallah. And where do you get this from? What world is going to give you these ma'arif? Wallahu alimun bima yaf'alun. And Allah knows what they do. He knows what they do. Just because you and I don't perceive it. So the first is that everything has meaning. And the second, everything is doing tasbih. Everything is doing tasbih. We have, in our tradition, the teachings of the ulama, that they used to be careful when they used to walk as to not step on the ants. Because the ants are mentioned in the Quran. There are those who are speaking to Nabi Sulaiman. So we have this understanding within our tradition. We say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now the third point, the first is that everything has meaning. The second is that everything has awareness. Everything has consciousness. Everything is doing tasbih. The third point, Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Al-Rahman, وَالسَّمَاءَ وَرَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَهَا الْمِيزَانِ أَلَّا تَغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. That we have made everything and we have raised everything in a balance. In a balance. Everything is properly measured. And Allah says, وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا. Do not transgress that balance. Do not go outside of the balance by which Allah has made creation. So when we look at the world, the tree is not just there for me to chop it down. The ant is not there for me to kick the anthill over. It's not just for me to manipulate in some Machiavellian way. The world has been created for me to understand the mizan by which Allah is showing His signs. So the third point is that everything is in a balance. And the fourth is that we have been commanded to obey that balance, to not transgress that balance. Now, the fifth point about the nature of the world, about the world we live in. Allah Azza wa Jal says, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. That look, observe the fasad in the world. Look at the fasad in the water and in the land that has been brought on not by what they did, not by bima fa'ala, bima kasaba, bima kasabat aydin nas, by what their hands have acquired. It's not just what they did. It's that they're doing something, but by doing that fasad, they're acquiring kasab, iktisab. They're acquiring wealth, power, luxury, influence, control. This is what is creating fasad in the world. So the fifth point is that Allah is calling us to look at the world. Look at the world we live in. And look at the fasad. And don't understand fasad as just an internal pollution. It's not just internal. But that internal pollution creates a world in which particular people, individuals, are doing iktisab. They're doing kasb mal. They're acquiring through a type of fasad in the land and in the water. And then the sixth and last point. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا. That do not do fasad in the earth after we have rectified it. The islah has been done. In other words, the world was made as it was made. We made it exactly the way it should have been. Just today I was out with my family. We went to, where did we go? Berry Farms? Berry Springs. And I was speaking with my family, my brother, and we were talking about the phenomena of a nature preserve, preserved land, protected lands. He said something I never thought about. He said, it's very ironic that humans create lands that are protected to protect from humans. I mean, look at the irony of the world we've created. And we're just looking at the river and the marsh and the swamps, and you're looking at the majesty of these birds and insects and tadpoles and even the mosquitoes. Fine, the mosquitoes, fine. All of them are living exactly the way that they're supposed to live. They're living exactly in perfect harmony. But it is the human being. We have it in the poetry. There's a beautiful line of poetry from the 8th Imam, Imam Rida, alayhi salatu wasalam. I'm paraphrasing here, it's worth looking if you get a chance to find it. In which he says that the wolf doesn't eat its own species. It might fight, but it doesn't eat its own species. Only the human being, I'm paraphrasing, is genocidal. Look at them. There's an Arab, poetry. He talks about how he's speaking from the voice of a Bedouin. He says, I was in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the night, and I heard the howl of a wolf, and I felt at peace. And sometime later, I heard the voice of a man, and I jumped out of my own skin in fear. Because you know what a wolf is going to do. A wolf is a wolf, but a man is an unpredictable, unimaginable, barbaric creature. We don't call a wolf barbaric. No matter how much it might do, we don't say it's barbaric. A wolf does what it does. But a human being can get to that level where it becomes genocidal. You wipe out entire peoples and nations. And so Allah is saying, وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that do not corrupt, do not do corruption in the earth, in the land. بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحَهَا. We've already made it exactly the way it should be. So the last principle of the world is that the world is fine. So if you're going to engage in it, at least the commandment is, do not do fasad. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So then the question is, what do we do? Do we just, go back and pretend like we're not in the world? Do we just press rewind on all of, human creation? No. This is where technology comes in. This is where the Islamic analog for what we call technology comes in. And the Quran and the Hadith have a specific term for this. And that term is imara. Imara, there's a very famous verse in the Holy Quran which we've all heard, that وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ, that we didn't create the jinn and the ins except that إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, except that they worship. Now when people ask, what is my purpose of creation? This is the verse that is often offered. But the Quran offers 5 different reasons for the purpose of creation. And one of them is imara. Imara literally means to cultivate, to sow the seeds of something. In the verse that I recited in the beginning of the lecture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says, هُوَ أَنْشَأَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ, that we placed you in the earth. We put you in the earth. وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا, that you do imara in the earth. You cultivate the earth. How do you cultivate the earth? With your bare hands? No, with technology. So now, for us, in our Muslim paradigm, in the Islamic worldview, we want to know, as we've been talking about, what is the Islamic paradigm of governance? What is the Islamic paradigm of education? What is the Islamic paradigm of masajid, as opposed to corporate structures? Now, what is the Islamic paradigm of imara as opposed to technology? Technology, in the world that is dominating technology, is Machiavellian. It is do because you can. This is the base principle. Do because you can. This is the fundamental law of innovation. It's about efficiency and speed of production, whether it's because of the market or because of political interest. In the Islamic culture, we're not alien to the fact of doing. We're okay with doing. But our guiding principle is not do because you can. It is do because you should. So the question for us is, when should we and why should we and how should we? Not just can I. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So when we look at the concept of imara, there's a hadith in which Amir al-Mu'mineen talks about man has been given 5 different ways to make a living, to sustain his or herself. And those 5 ways, he says, al-imara, wal-imara, wal-tijara, wal-ijara, wal-sadaqat. Imara is governance. Imara is cultivation, producing, tilling the land. Tijara is trade, a type of bartering. Ijara is buying and selling and leasing and renting. And then finally, sadaqat, charity, endowments, wuquf. So imara, cultivating, has been looked at not just like an innovation that you do in your garage, but it's a means of livelihood. It's part of your careers. It's a motivation for you to make your bread, get your bag, whatever. So imara has been recognized as a means of livelihood. It's not just, the thing you do on the weekend where you just have your backyard farm. No, it's a means of livelihood, of production. But it has some guiding principles. One of those guiding principles, in the very verse that we recited from the beginning, before mentioning فَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا, Allah, what did He say? He says, أَنَعْبُدَ اللَّهِ, worship Allah. So imara is secondary or subsumed under ibadah. The reason why the ulama give you that answer that we often don't like to hear, that we've been created for no other reason except for ibadah, is because ibadah has this type of umbrella effect. Everything falls under it, including imara, including work, innovation, cultivating the land, producing stuff. So for us, imara, we're talking about our analog for technology. What do we mean by technology when we talk about it as Muslims? The first guiding principle is that, does the thing I'm making, does the thing I'm producing, whether in a lab or in my farm, does it fall under ibadah or not? Does it fall under worshipping Allah, who has made the world by which I am cultivating the land? Is it possible for me to say that I'm worshipping Allah and create fisq and a type of fasad in the land? Is it possible for me to do my prayer? Again, please step out of the halal haram discussion. Is it possible for me to pray my prayer to the same Allah who created the world, that I'm going to bulldoze everything so that I can make a buck? Is it possible to have that mentality? Because that's the world we live in. So for us now, the first guiding principle is an ni'budullah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I just want to illustrate a difference now. When we talk about, just from this one idea of an ni'budullah and a perception of the world, these two together, creates a paradigm of technology for us, of imara for us. Now when I compare it with how people think about technology, technology asks, as we said, can I do it? Imara asks, should I do it? Technology asks, what can I do? Imara asks, what have I been entrusted to do? The world as an amana. Within the amana, what have I been entrusted to do? Technology asks, does this increase power and control and speed? Imara asks, does it increase responsibility? Modernity and technology, that paradigm will ask, does it make life easier? And this is the guiding principle for you and I as consumers. Does it make my life easier? Imara asks, does it make the soul better? When we look at modern technology and the products of this phenomena of technology, the first response that you and I have is at the level of the soul. And one of the reasons, I just heard a term called techno-pessimism. The people are they're realizing that this is just not healthy, Muslim and otherwise. And the tools that they've been promised to bring about communication and access and ease of communication or whatever, knowledge, entertainment, it's having an effect, whether I'm Muslim or otherwise, on my soul, psyche, spirituality, mental well-being, or it's delaying me for my hot yoga class. Whatever it is, people realize that it's affecting me. And so for us, the question with imara is, how does it affect the soul? Now this, I know for now, up till now, has been kind of an abstract discussion because we have careers, we have jobs, we have investments. And I just want to leave with one tangible sort of point for you and I. If you recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And that is to come back to what we were talking about. That each and every one of us is also a world. It might be that I'm stuck in a position whereby my company or my enterprise or my own venture, whatever it is partaking in the world that is conflicting with these principles. And for each individual, you have to figure out how to reconcile with that. We all have it. You know, if you just Google cobalt mining and just look at how cobalt is mined in parts of Africa, it's insanity, the kind of conditions of these people. But we're all using it in our lithium batteries, and so we're all plugged in. And so individually, each and every one of us has to figure out to what degree can we justify our participation in the matrix. But as a community now, it is late in the game, but not beyond repair. That we figure out as a community, where do we stand? What is our red line? What is normative? What is normal in our centers, in our masajid, in our schools? To give you an example, the saddest thing to me that I hear is when parents talk about how in our Islamic school, I just wish every student had an iPad. I wish that every student had a computer at his desk. And you're sitting there thinking, like, why? You're already upset that your kid is zoned out at home 14 hours a day, 8 hours a day. And now you want to bring in the same garbage in schools and pass out iPads and computers? I mean, what is that way of thinking? So in our communities, to be at least courageous to figure out what is the effect of these things and to what degree can we stave them off from entering into our masajid, into our centers, into our Islamic schools, and into our families. And lastly, as I said, as Amir al-Mu'mineen said, we are all worlds within and ourselves. And so for myself, the world that I'm in, the world of my nafs, the world of my spirit, what am I willing to bring in to corrupt it, to distract it, to cause it anxiety and despair, loneliness? When will I realize, as we talked about last night, the moment of awakening, inshallah is tonight, that I am going to take responsibility for my spirit, for the world that I live in. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, there's a question that often gets asked, and that is, what does this have to do with Aba Abdullah? What does this have to do with the Masibah? And I've answered this once before, but it's worth repeating because it's such a heavy night. It is a heavy night. When we talk about the mission of Aba Abdullah, it's a line that we've all heard before. He said that, I have not set out for any type of worldly gain, but I have set out to do islah in the ummah of my Rasul, of Rasulullah. This islah, when we say from Allah, don't do, fasad in the earth, ba'da islahiha. This is what we're talking about. Allah has made everything exactly the way it should be. That understanding that Allah has given us about the world, Aba Abdullah is using that same term of islah to give meaning to what he's doing. You and I, who are followers of Aba Abdullah, where's the islah? Where's the rectification? In ourselves, first and foremost. قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ. First in ourselves as individuals, and then in our families. This islah, whether we're talking about it from Allah, from Plato, from Aba Abdullah, from the Mimbar, from the Zakir, from the Sheikh, all of this is part of that divine message of the movement of Aba Abdullah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As I said, these are heavy nights though. They are heavy nights. On my way here, I was thinking to myself, how is it that we are already in Yom Ashur? I mean, the days have come, the nights have come, and you and I are tired. We are exhausted, some of us. It might be the case that maybe some of you are hungry or thirsty. But each and every one of us will go home tonight. Each and every one of us will have a bed to sleep in. Those of us who are thirsty, we can take a sip of water. Those of us who have children, we can tuck them in at night. So when we are here in the Fajr Azah, even though it's Yom Ashur, and we're coming down to those last moments before the day of Ashura, it's on us to remember that the caravan of Aba Abdullah, while we may go home, they will continue towards Sham. They will continue towards Kufa. And they will come back to Medina without those who they left with. There's a hadith which shows the adab and the akhlaq of the A'immah. There was a group of people, this is for you and I. This is a lesson for you and I, that what does it mean to visit the Ahlul Bayt? Because make no mistake about it, we believe that we are visiting the Ahlul Bayt. We are Za'irin. We are all Zuwar. We are all in the presence of Sayyid Fatima Zahra. We are all among a mother who's witnessed the most horrific of tragedies. There was a group of people who went to go visit Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, and when they had stayed with him, he gave them the best protocol, with the best food and the best type of hosting. Himself, and the servants of the house provided all of their meals and their stay, their lodging. They hosted them like chief guests. And on the last day, on the third day, when they were departing, Imam as-Sadiq stayed back and instructed the servants of the house to not help them. As they were tying their camels and loading up their clothes and their goods, they were alone. And Imam as-Sadiq and the servants are simply watching. And among them, they started speaking to one another. And they said that, is it the case that we have offended our Imam? Is it the case that we've done something to upset him? So they came together and they came to Imam al-Sadiq and they asked him that, Ya Imam, is it the case that we've upset you? Have we done something to you? Imam al-Sadiq says to them that no. Us, the Ahlul Bayt, we don't help anyone depart from us. We don't give anyone the sense that we are eager for their departure. When they're with us, we're with them. We stay with them. And we ask tonight, with the tawassul to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, that you make us zawar for our entire lives. You make us zawar, you make us in the presence of the Imam, because as long as we're in the presence of the Imam is not going to turn us away, because this is their adab, this is their akhlaq, this is how they were. Tonight is Yawm Ashur. This is a night that the family of Rasulullah has been preparing for and dreading. The women of Bani Hashim, the women of the family of Rasulullah, understand that tomorrow they are all going to go into the battlefield, and my son Qasim is not going to return. My sons Own and Muhammad are not going to return. Habib is going to go and not return. And each of them are bidding their children wasiyah and their final will and testimony, their final advice. Bibi Zainab is telling Qasim, Own and Muhammad are spoken to. Ali Akbar is spoken to. Abbas is spoken to. They say in the Maqtal that Abu Abdullah divided the night into 3 parts. He divided a part of the night for the family. He divided a part of the night for ibadah, and he divided a part of the night for the ashab. In the first part of the night, where each of the family members were giving wasiyah and preparing their family members and their sons for battle for the next day, they say in the Maqtal that either Hazrat Abbas or Ali Akbar and Habib were walking around from tent to tent to serve the families. There came a point where Habib is outside of the tent of Sayyidah Zainab, and he hears a conversation between Sayyidah Zainab and Abu Abdullah. Sayyidah Zainab says to Abu Abdullah that the ashab of our father Amirul Mu'mineen deserted him. The ashab of our brother Hassan al-Mujtaba deserted him. Will your ashab leave you? Will you be on the battlefield alone? Habib hears this. Before Abu Abdullah can respond, he says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And the ashab come running towards him, thinking that something has happened. And he says to them that the daughter of Amirul Mu'mineen is taking a test from each and every one of you. She wants to know that each and every one of you are not going to desert our Mawla and Master. Each of them begin to say, Allahu Akbar. Hayhat min nadhillah. Hayhat min nadhillah. A part of the night is for the ashab, where Abu Abdullah gathers all of the soldiers, the sons of Banu Hashim and the friends and companions of his. And he gathers them all under a single tent. And he says, each and every one of you, all of you are guaranteed Jannah. You have fulfilled your oath. You have completed your promise to my mother. You are all free. Jannah is for you. You're free to go. None of them move. He looks at Hazrat Abbas. He tells Hazrat Abbas to light a candle in the back. He says, I'm going to turn off all of the lights. When Abbas closes that lamp, that light, each and every one of you can leave. If you have ghaira, where you're prevented to leave in front of me, you can leave in the darkness of the night. There's no harm to you. There's no recompense to you. Now I think about the story and I say, why Hazrat Abbas? Why Hazrat Abbas? Because Abu Abdullah knew, if in the darkness of the night the entire tent leaves, Hazrat Abbas is going to be there to relight that candle. Abbas will not leave his brother's side. None of them leave. They say in the Maqtal that the light was closed 3 times. And finally, the first person to speak was Muslim bin Awsija. And he stands up. He says, Wallah, if you cut us into pieces 1,000 times, we will never leave you. Ya Sayyidi, Ya Mawlai, we will never depart from you. This is Yawm Ashur. And in the final hours of the night, they spent it in ibadah. And I think to myself, you and I also pray. You and I also have prayed in the middle of the night. But what have we prayed for? What have they prayed for? And I think to myself, perhaps Abbas is praying for the safety of his sister. Abu Abdullah is praying for the safety of Sakina. Aun and Muhammad are praying for the safety of Sayyid Zainab. Knowing that despite the fact that they're making dua for their mother and their sister, that they will not be there to protect them when the tents are lit on fire. This is how the final hours of Yawm Ashura were spent. Till a point comes where the adhan for Salatul Fajr is recited. And Ali al-Akbar comes up to the front and begins to recite the adhan, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. And in the sounds of the final azan of Ali Akbar, the one who resembled the Prophet in action and in voice, they're all crying when they hear the name of Muhammad, that this is going to be the final azan that they're going to hear from the son of Abu Abdullah, from this beautiful man. On the day of Ashura, when all of the companions have gone, when Habib has gone, when Muslim bin Awsija is gone, when Joan is gone, when the family of Banu Hashim are gone, when Ali Akbar leaves, and Hazrat Abbas has brought back the body of his son, when he has brought back the body of Aun and Muhammad, when he has brought back the pieces of the body of Qasim, there comes a point when Abbas is no longer there. There comes a point where the flag bearer of the army is no longer there. Abu al-Fath Abbas goes into the tent to prepare himself for the battle. When he comes out after preparing himself, he looks out to the battlefield. He looks out back to the bodies. He looks to the left, he looks to the right. He says, Hal min nasri yansurana. Nobody responds. He says, Oh Abbas, where are you? Qasim, come to my aid. Ali Akbar, I need you. He says, Hal min dabbin yudhibbu an haramid Rasulullah. Is there any defender of the haram of Rasulullah? When Abu Abdullah makes this shout, when he claims this, is anybody there to defend the haram of Rasulullah? The ladies begin to cry from the khaymah. The wails of the ladies begin to come out. Abu Abdullah turns to the tent of Lady Zainab. He walks over and opens the curtain. He says, what is the commotion? She says to him that when you said, Hal min dabbin yadhibbu an harami Rasulullah, Ali Asghar fell out from his cradle. He fell to the ground as if he was calling out to respond to you. Abu Abdullah sits on the floor. He asks Lady Zainab, bring me a cloth. Bring me a white cloth. Abu Abdullah opens the cloth. He asks for the small body of a 6-month-old son. He takes the body of Ali Asghar and puts it on this kafan. He wraps it the way you wrap a kafan. He takes the kafan that is wrapped Ali Asghar and puts it under his abba. And as he comes out from the tent, 2 women follow him out, Rabab and Bibi Zainab. And clinging to Bibi Zainab is a small girl, Bibi Sakina. And she looks up at Sayyid Zainab and she says, where is Baba taking my young brother? Rabab says that he's thirsty. He's been thirsty for 3 days. Your Baba is taking him to get some water. It's like, look at the love of a sister for her younger brother. She doesn't ask for water for herself. She is content with the response that my 6-month-old brother will perhaps get some drops of water. Abu Abdullah comes out into the battlefield. He puts the Abba over his shoulder, and the enemy sees the young baby. They saw the baby. When they see Ali Asghar, they have no mercy. Nobody brings a glass of water for Ali Asghar. Imam Hussein says, Ya qawm, in lam tarhamuni farhamu hadha tif. Even if you have no mercy for me, have mercy for this baby. Still nobody moves. Abu Abdullah takes his young son of 6 months and puts him on the hot sands of Karbala. He steps back. If you think that I'm going to take the water for myself, the water is for this young baby. Still nobody stands forward. Abu Abdullah picks up his son from the hot sands of Karbala. He puts him back into his arms. Abu Abdullah is calling out that if you are not free, at least be free in this world. Have mercy on this baby. Have mercy on my 6-month-old son. Umar ibn Sa'd calls out Hurmala that cut off the kalam of Hussein, cut off the speech of Hussein. There's a murmur in the army. Hurmala comes forward with a 3-pronged arrow. The first time that he puts the arrow on the bow, the arrow falls down. He picks it up the second time, he puts the arrow on the bow, it falls down the second time. He puts the arrow on the bow the third time. Umar ibn Sa'd says to him, if they asked me who was the most stone cold of them, the most cold-hearted of them, I would have said, Hurmala is the one. He says, what is the matter with you? Hurmala says in the Maqtal that every time I aim the arrow at this baby, a lady covered in a burqa stands up in front and says, please do not kill the son of my son. Have mercy on him. I cannot aim. Umar ibn Sa'd commands him to fire the arrow. Abu Abdullah is listening to the cries of Ali Asghar. There's a moment where the cries are silenced. Abu Abdullah feels an arrow piercing his arm. He looks down. ذُهِبَ مِنَ الْأُذُنِ إِلَى الْأُذُنِ. It has been pierced from ear to ear. He feels the blood of Ali Asghar pouring down his arms. He looks to the heavens. He says, هَوَّنَ عَلَيَّ مَا نَزَلَ بِي. I can bear all of this because أَنَّهُ بِعَيْنِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Because it is happening in the eyes of Allah. He walks back towards the tent. Now imagine Abu Abdullah has promised Sakina a water for Ali Asghar. What state is she going to be in? What hope will she have for her younger brother? He walks back towards the tent of Lubab. He walks back towards the tent of Lubab. He says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridham biqadaihi. بِقَضَائِهِ وَتَسْلِيمًا لِأَمْرِهِ. He walks back 7 times. The Maqtal says, I say to Abu Abdullah, you had the strength to carry Ali Akbar, you had the strength to carry the arms of Abbas, but this 6-month-old baby is causing you to go back and forth. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridham biqadaihi wa amri taslima. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matana Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, ای قافله عشاق هنگام بلا آمد، هنگام بلا آمد. ای قافله عشاق هنگام بلا آمد، هنگام بلا آمد، هنگام به خون خفتن در کرب و بلا آمد، در کرب و بلا آمد، هنگام به خون خفتن در کرب و بلا آمد، در کرب و بلا آمد، احرام به خون بسته فرزند رسول الله از سعی و صفا آمد، شد نوبت قربانی حاجی به منا آمد، حاجی به منا آمد، این همان وعده رسول الله است. ای یاران اینجا ما را قتلگاه است، این همان وعده رسول الله است. ای یاران اینجا ما را قتلگاه است. السلام ای معراج خون خدا، السلام السلام ای کرب و بلا، یا حسین یا حسین یا ابن المرتضی، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، ماشاءالله، یا حسین یا حسین یا ابن فرزند رسول الله در کرب و بلا تنهاست، در کرب و بلا تنهاست، فرزند رسول الله در کرب و بلا تنهاست، در کرب و بلا تنهاست، ای لشکر صار الله هنگام وفا یه ماست، هنگام وفای ماست، طفلان و زنان در ترس هر سو نگران هستند، در فکر و گمان هستند، مردان خدا وقت مردی و رشادت هاست، هنگام شجاعت هاست، ای یاران دیگر شد وقت امتحان، وقت جان بازی شد ای اهل ایمان، ای یاران دیگر شد وقت امتحان، وقت جان بازی شد ای اهل ایمان، السلام ای معراج خون خدا، السلام السلام ای کرب و بلا، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا ابن المرتضی، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین ای قافله عشاق هنگام بلا آمد، هنگام بلا آمد، هنگام به خون خفتن در کرب و بلا آمد، در کرب و بلا آمد، احرام به خون بسته فرزند رسول الله از سعی و صفا آمد، شد نوبت قربانی حاجی به منا آمد، حاجی به منا آمد، این همان وعده رسول الله است. ای یاران اینجا ما را قتلگاه است. السلام ای معراج خون خدا، السلام السلام ای کرب و بلا، یا حسین المرتضی، یا حسین یا حسین یا ابن المرتضی، یا حسین یا حسین یا ابن المرتضی، یا حسین احسن یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا اصغر کو لے کے گود میں کہتی ہے کربلا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا، اصغر کو لے کے گود میں کہتی ہے کربلا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی چھ ماہ کے غریب مسافر کو سونپ کے کہنے لگے حسین یہ قبر صغیر سے رکھنا ذرا خیال میرے تشنا کام کا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی کبھی گھر مادر یہ بین کرتی تھی دل میں ہے یہ کسک، سوگرا تمہاری گود سے آغوش قبر تک، اصغر کو موت نے کہیں رکنے نہیں دیا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا، ماں سوچتی تھی ڈھلتا ہے دن ہو رہی ہے شام، جھولے میں لوٹ آئے گا شاید وہ تشنا کام، لیکن غضب ہوا کہ وہ جھولا بھی جل گیا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، یہ وہ علی ہے جس گلیوں میں شہر کوفہ کی بازار شام میں شیری کے گھر کبھی کبھی دربار شام میں، مرنے کے بعد بھی علی اصغر سفر میں تھا، یہ وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، وہ علی ہے جس کو کبھی گھر نہیں ملا ہے، وہ علی नन्हे से सर को यास से बस तकते रहते थे, फिर खून रोके सैयद सज्जाद कहते थे, मैं वो अली हूँ जिसका भरा घर उजड़ गया, ये वो अली है जिसको कभी घर नहीं मिला है, ये वो अली है जिसको कभी घर नहीं मिला। जाने लगा वतन जो गरीबों का कारवां, मुड़ मुड़ के कहती जाती थी एक खाली गोद माँ, रखियो संभाल कैसे अर्ज़ नैनवा, ये वो अली है जिसको कभी घर नहीं मिला है, वो अली है जिसको कभी घर नहीं मिला है। या हुसैन 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 या हुसैन। On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. One more time. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. No army left and I'm alone preparing for my fight. I hear a cry as if Asghar says I'm here right by your side. Your bravery and courage as you climbed into my arms. Hurmala's cursed arrow spilled your blood onto my palms. Your thirsty neck was pierced. Your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. Barely awakened to this world, Abdullah, did you leave? You left while I raised you up high, your blood soaking my sleeve. What my eyes witnessed, my broken heart still could not believe. The voice sounded from the heavens and called out, do not grieve. He is now safe from their spears. Your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. My son, you have not a crime upon your soul, yet they aggress. No father should need to bear and see his child's blood-stained chest. Mere cries and tears and screams and wails my hurt they can't express. Your pain is mine, Abdullah, I'm forever in distress. Your death was met with cheers. Your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. On plains of blood and tears, your cries fell on deaf ears. I lay here on the dunes alone, my tears filling my eye.
Shimmer taunts and sits upon my chest, and I soon will die. Yet it is not for my own life, Abdullah, that I cry. For you the water I had not the power to provide. You passed in thirst and fear, your cries fell on deaf ears, on plains of blood and tears. Your cries fell on deaf ears, on plains of blood and tears. Your cries fell on deaf ears. Ya Hussein.
صلوات. کم آهسته‌تر به کجا می روی؟ کم آهسته‌تر به کجا می روی؟ بدون زینبت تو چرا می روی؟ بدون زینبت تو چرا می روی؟ مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا. دل من اسیر نام نیکوی تو، دل من اسیر نام نیکوی تو، تپش های دلم نام نیکوی تو، تپش های دلم نام نیکوی تو. به زخم دل من یا اخا مرهمی، به زخم دل من یا اخا مرهمی، پس از تو برایم کو دگر محرمی. مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا. خدا همراه تو، تو روی کربلا، خدا همراه تو، تو روی کربلا. وعده ملاقات اثر نیزه ها، وعده ملاقات اثر نیزه ها. مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا. دل من اسیر نام نیکوی تو، دل من اسیر نام نیکوی تو، تپش های دلم نام نیکوی تو، تپش های دلم نام نیکوی تو. به زخم دل من یا اخا مرهمی، به زخم دل من یا اخا مرهمی، پس از تو برایم کو دگر محرمی. مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا، مهلا مهلا یا ابن زهرا.
شاهدین در حرمش مهمان است، مکن ای صبح طلوع، مکن ای
صبح طلوع،
فردا بدنش زیر سم اسفان است،
اون ای صبح طلوع، ای صبح طلوع.
شبی را شاهدین در حرمش مهمان است، شبی را شاهدین در
همش مهمان است. مکن ای صبح طلوع، ای صبح طلوع، مکن ای صبح طلوع، مکن ای صبح طلوع.
شبی را شاهدین در حرمش مهمان است،
আগুনে সব তোলো আগুনে সব তোলো তোলো আগুনে সব তোলো
شاهدين در حرم اشرف مانست شبیه شاهدین در حرم اشرف مانست
আগুনে সব তোলো
مکنه صبح طلوع سه
আগুনে সব তোলো
شاهدین در حرم اشرف مانست مکنه صبح طلوع مکنه صبح طلوع
یا حسین
ہم حس
کرتے ہیں
ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مرنا ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مرنا ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مرنا ستم عباس کا کرتے ہیں ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مرنا ستم عباس کا ماتم حرم عباس کا ہو گیا مرنا ستم عباس کا
ہم سے غم شبیر بھلایا نہیں جاتا 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 یہ داغ کلیجے کا یہ داغ کلیجے کا مٹایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے غم شبیر بھلایا 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 نہیں جاتا اٹھتے ہیں کبھی بیٹھتے ہیں مولا زمیں پر اٹھتے ہیں کبھی بیٹھتے ہیں مولا زمیں پر کیا لاشائے فرزند کیا لاشائے فرزند اٹھایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے غم شبیر بھلایا 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 نہیں جاتا
کتنے تن شبیر پہ ہے تیر نمایاں، کتنے تن شبیر پہ ہے تیر نمایاں، بچی کو بھی سینے سے، بچی کو بھی سینے سے لگایا نہیں جاتا، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا، یہ داغ کلیجے کا، یہ داغ کلیجے کا مٹایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا، قاسم کی نا امید رکھو مادر قاسم، قاسم کی نا امید رکھو مادر قاسم، لاشے کی یہ حالت ہے، لاشے کی یہ حالت ہے کہ لایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا، یہ داغ کلیجے کا، یہ داغ کلیجے کا مٹایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، غم شبیر بلایا نہیں جاتا، قاسم کی نا امید رکھو مادر قاسم، قاسم کی نا امید رکھو مادر قاسم، لاشے کی یہ حالت ہے، لاشے کی یہ حالت ہے کہ لایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، ہمیشہ بھی بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، ہمیشہ بھی بلایا نہیں جاتا ہم سے، ہمیشہ بھی بلایا نہیں جاتا،
جب خیمے میں رخصت کو شہ بحر و برائے، چلائی سکینہ میرے بے کس پدر آئے، شہ کہتے تھے بی بی ہمیں رو کر نہ رلاؤ، پھر پیار کریں ہم تمہیں منہ آگے کو لاؤ، وہ کہتی تھی ہمراہ مجھے لے کے تو جاؤ، میں کیا کروں میدان سے گر جا کے نہ آؤ، نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا، میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا، چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آیا نکلتی نہیں سیدانیاں باہر سینے پہ سلائیں گی تمہیں رات میں مادر کیوں کہتی ہو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا ننھے سے کلیجے پہ میرے چلتی ہے تلوار کھلتا نہیں کیوں آپ نے باندھے ہیں یہ ہتھیار میں آپ کو کھو کر نہ کبھی پاؤں گی بابا میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا آتی ہے بلا سر پہ تو پہلے مجھے وارو مر جاؤں گی بابا نہ سدھارو نہ سدھارو جاؤ گے جہاں میں بھی وہیں جاؤں گی بابا میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی نیند آئے گی شب ہوگی تو پھر خاک پہ سوئیں گے کہاں سینے پہ تو اصغر کو سلائیں گے وہاں اچھا میں وہیں خاک پہ سو جاؤں گی بابا میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند کی جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند جب آپ کی بو پاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا کچھ دور نہ تھے ہم کہ تمہیں نیند نہ آئے کیا ہوئے گا جب ہوگی مہینوں کی جدائی بی بی نہ کہو میں نہیں سو پاؤں گی بابا میں رات کو مقتل میں چلی آؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا نیند آئے گی جب آپ کی چوپاؤں گی بابا چلی آؤں گی بابا
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین بالشهداء
لبيك يا حسين 3 times بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين ليست كأعوام مضت هذه الليالي كم من حبيب غائب كم من موالي كم خادم كم لاطم من الرجال بأي حال قد غدا بأي حال شبابنا بوعيهم كنا حيارى قبل الصدور ترجموا لنا الشعارا إلى الحسين وضحوا ذاك المسارا مضوا على الحق الذي عليه سارا عليه سارا بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين البعض أشلى أن أتى إذ قطعوه وأسى الذي فوق الحصير جمعوه والبعض دون رأسه قد أحضروه وأسى ذبيحا شيبه قد خضبوه قد خضبوه بعض أتى وبعضهم أمسى فقيدا مجهولة آثاره قضى بعيدا له تجرعت فقدا شديدا تنعى حبيبها الذي أضحى شهيدا أضحى شهيدا بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بنت رأيناها هنا تنعى أباها بكفه كم أمسكات هنا يداها اليوم تبكي وحدها لمن جفاها وهو الذي في قبره حتما بكاها حتما بكاها يا فاطم قومي إلى أبهى شبابي ولتجمعي أوصالهم عن التراب كما جمعت جسم مسلوب الثياب فإنهم واسوا حسينا بالمصاب بالمصاب بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين كم من مضيف قد خلا من اليدين تلك التي أعطت على حب الحسين كم من شهيد صب دمع المقلتين والماء في كفوفه مثل اللجين مثل اللجين لنا شباب خلفوا الأشواق فينا لن يحضروا في العام هذا 40 لكن ستلقاهم قلوب المؤمنين في كربلاء يستقبلون الزائرين الزائرين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين بالشهداء لبيك يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
صلي على محمد وعلى آل محمد وحسينا 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 وحسينا
غافل بازار بلا که مرا میبری از سر نشه پدرم با کجا میبری غافل سالار بلا که مرا میبری از سر نشه پدرم با کجا میبری چی کنم با دلم چی کنم با دلم مانده اینجا دلم چی کنم با دلم مانده اینجا دلم واه حسینا واه 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 حسینا سینه سوزان مرا تو نمک میزنی سینه سوزان مرا تو نمک میزنی امه مظلوم مرا تو کتک میزنی امه مظلوم مرا تو کتک میزنی امم را مزن امم را مزن امم را مزن او بود جان من امم را مزن او بود جان من و حسینا و حسینا جسم شریف شهدا به زمین ماندن جسم شریف شهدا به زمین ماندن بر بدن بی سرشان از پاها راندن بر بدن بی سرشان از پاها راندن آن بدن های پاک آن بدن های پاک آن بدن های پاک شده غلطان به خاک آن بدن های پاک شده غلطان به خاک و حسینا و حسینا و حسینا سینه سوزان مرا تو نمک میزنی سینه سوزان مرا تو نمک میزنی امه مظلوم مرا تو کتک میزنی امه مظلوم مرا تو کتک میزنی امم را مزن امم را مزن امم را مزن او بود جان من امم را مزن او بود جان من و حسینا و صلی علی محمد و علی آل محمد
From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, 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 Jana. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, Jawad to Karbala, Karbala, Jana, Bahba, Sant. I left my heart in Karbala. The luminous moonlight in the way, the rising sun that brightens the way. Heaven without you would be in flame. You are the heaven in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. Your visitors offer you their hands. Enemies will never understand. How can I go to the sand? How can the thirst swim in Karbala, in Karbala? Heaven is opening, Ya Hussein. Angels descending, Ya Hussein. They are reciting Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, 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 to the hand of God that nurtures the young, speaking Allah, you are the tongue, separating his right from the wrong, elevated in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala, the ship that sails with you through the waves, and whoever boards your ship is safe, immune from the hardships of grave, whoever mourns for you and whoever mourns you in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. When will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When under your dome will I give again? From Najaf I walk in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, 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 to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. Salawat. توجه للزيارة إن شاء الله. صلى الله عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا خير خلق الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. Let's go to Karbala. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى اللقيلة زينب وعلى أبا الفضل العباس. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا المرتضى. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي التقي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي النقي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمامي وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى لك الفرج وسهل ظهورك وخروجك وجعلنا الله من أعوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك وتحت لوائك جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. الفاتحة.